My name is Olivia Hart, and 3 days ago, my father did something I never imagined a son could do to his own father. He flew my grandfather, Theodore Hart, the man who turned a rusted dock into a shipping empire, on what he called a memory trip to Lisbon. And then he left him there. No wallet, no phone, no passport. Just the sea breeze and a promise whispered at the gate. "You've had enough." "Old man," my father said. Dad thought he could come home, change the locks on Grandpa's Bellevue mansion, and start counting what wasn't his. My grandfather's fortune. But when he pushed open the front door, there was Grandpa himself. Dry, composed, smiling, his cane striking once against the marble. "Oh, you're back," Grandpa said. "I have a surprise for you." That surprise would unravel my father's scheme, expose the decay within our family, and force me to choose which bloodline to protect. I thought I knew how I'd choose. I didn't. Dad, Richard Hart, was all smooth charm at SeaTac, efficiency wrapped in confidence. The kind of man who could convince a gate agent to rearrange the weather if it suited him. "One last trip before we redo your study, Pop," he'd said, gripping Grandpa's shoulder. "You'll love Lisbon, the tiles, the sardines." Then he winked at me. "We'll bring back recipes." I didn't trust that wink. I hadn't trusted any of Dad's winks since Mom died. On our layover through JFK, Grandpa napped with his hat tipped over his eyes while I texted Maya, my best friend and a junior associate at Lytton and Ames. "If Dad moves Grandpa's accounts while they're abroad, can a bank freeze be undone?" She replied with a dismissive emoji and, "Stop catastrophizing, Liv. No one steals from a billionaire with a paper trail." In Lisbon, the cobblestones glistened after rain. Grandpa told stories of hauling rope at 14, of learning patience from dock workers who used a bottle cap and chalk to teach chess. Dad laughed at all the right moments, ordered the wine, and insisted on holding the passports so Pop doesn't lose them. On the third day, near the Bellem Tower, Dad announced a detour. "Pop needs a nap. Let's split up, Olivia. Grab us some pastries. I'll take Pop to the hotel." I hesitated. Grandpa squeezed my hand. "Go on, kiddo." "Bring 3. By the time I returned, the concierge's polite smile had stiffened. "No, Miss Hart. Mr. Hart and your grandfather have checked out." The keys were deactivated. My chest turned to ice. I called Dad again and again. Straight to voicemail. I sat on a stone step and counted breaths. 10 in. 10 out. Then I did the thing my family called meddling, but Grandpa always called backbone. I moved police report, U.S. consulate, 30 hours of calls under fluorescent lights. In a cramped interview room, a consular officer named Patricia asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Has your father ever tried to take your grandfather's assets?" I opened my mouth to deny it, and nothing came out. When Grandpa's emergency passport was finally ready, "Theodore Hart," Patricia slid another envelope across the table. "He asked us to give you this when you arrived." Inside was a note in Grandpa's firm, blocky handwriting. "Olive branch, Olive. Follow the list. Stay calm, surprise him at home. Call Maya. Tell her to open the folder named Blue Harbor." "Blue Harbor?" Maya repeated over speaker as I hurried through Lisbon's morning crowds. "Your grandfather left me an encrypted folder with that name 2 months ago," she said. I thought it was case prep. I didn't open it. "Open it," I said. My voice was shaking now. Keystrokes. A quiet exhale. "Liv." "Wow, what a setup," Maya breathed. Her tone dropped. "Your grandfather expected a transfer of assets trick. He recorded meetings with Greg Sloan, that notary your dad uses for off-the-record estate changes. He logged your dad's gambling debts. There's a spreadsheet and emails to 3 real estate brokers asking for valuations on the Bellevue property. All dated 6 weeks ago." My pulse pounded. "He knew," Maya said. "He suspected everything, and he left a failsafe. If your dad ever moved him across borders without his phone or wallet, I was to contact Oza Haynes at the Western District of Washington. There's a memo. Elder financial exploitation. Transporting funds with fraudulent intent, crossing both state and national lines. Why me? Why not just press the button himself? Because he wanted you to be the one making the move. Your decision recorded. Choice." The words stung. At the consulate, Patricia smiled as if we shared a secret. "Your grandfather's car is ready. The driver knows where to go. He's outside." She tilted her head slightly. "He'll end up exactly where he should." On the flight back, I read Blue Harbor cover to cover. Grandpa had kept a diary, short, exact notes. Ours charm hides decay. Love craves shortcuts. Despises the patient dignity of work. He'd even recorded Dad, persuading him to sign a medical update on a laptop in a Starbucks. The same Starbucks where, according to Blue Harbor, Sloan notarized the deed for $300 cash. Off-site. No IDs scanned. Midway over the Atlantic, a message came in from a contact labeled Pearl. Grandpa, land, change cars, use the garden entrance. He'll try the front first. Leave the door unlatched. Recording on. I texted back, "What's the surprise?" The typing dots flickered, then his reply appeared. "Justice." The kind that's also mercy. The hardest kind. I dozed for 20 minutes, dreaming of locks turning, chess pieces gliding over marble. My father's face when the king toppled. Seattle's rain met me at the curb. Sharp, clean, familiar. At the mansion, the camellias along the brick path were still in bloom, pink cups nodding like gossipers. Inside stood Grandpa in his navy cardigan, more alive than I'd seen him in years. His eyes, pale sea glass clear, shone. Olive. He pulled me in for a fierce hug, leaning then on his cane. "Did Patricia give you the note? And the reminder to stay calm?" I tried for a smile. "That was your line when I used to storm home angry." He chuckled. "Fire has its moments, but today we keep it banked. We had 20 minutes. Security cameras were already recording." Maya's firm had sent a technician to reroute all doorbell, indoor cameras, and microphones to a secure cloud. A locksmith, Frank, not Sloan, had changed the locks at dawn. At 10:12 a.m., a silver BMW rolled into the driveway. Dad stepped out, immaculate in his charcoal coat. Aunt Claire, his sister, lacquered and humming with her usual second-hand malice, emerged from the passenger side. My throat constricted. So it wasn't just theft. It was collusion. Keys scraped the front door. Once, twice. Harder. A curse. Footsteps shifted to the back. The new lock held firm. Silence. Then, the doorbell. I glanced at Grandpa. He nodded and opened the door. Dad blinked. The grandfather he'd abandoned, upright, smiling. The granddaughter he'd dismissed as too soft to choose sides. "What? How? Oh, you're back." Grandpa smiled. "I have a surprise for you." Dad put on concern like a tie. "We were sick, Pop. Food poisoning. We thought you've done enough," I said evenly. Calm voice, stay calm. "If you call this a misunderstanding, I'll record right over it with the truth." Aunt Claire's chin lifted. "You don't speak to your father that way." Grandpa's cane clicked against the marble. "My house, Claire. My rules." I raised my phone so the small red light glimmered. "Washington's a two-party consent state. You're both being recorded." Dad's mouth tightened. "You can't bar a legal owner from his own property." "About that," I said, pointing to the console table where a neat stack of documents sat under a silver tugboat paperweight. "Motion to invalidate the deed of gift. Fraud and undue influence. Filed this morning." I lifted another page. "And these. Emails you sent to Sable Realty and Nordland Homes asking for appraisals on this property before the supposed gift." Aunt Claire's polished mask cracked. "Richard!" Dad cut her off with a glare that said, "Don't speak." Grandpa's voice turned almost tender. "Richard, when did you start resenting what I built? Was it the first time I told you no?" Dad's jaw stayed locked, but his eyes sparked. "You never saw me. Only labor, markets, ships. You wanted a replacement, not a son." His voice rose. "I took you to Lisbon to remind you who you were, and you punished me for it." "Lisbon," I repeated. "Where you stole his passport and left him stranded?" Dad shrugged, a cheap flicker. "He got back, didn't he?" Grandpa nodded. "I did. And because of that, you get the mercy part." Dad actually laughed, sharp and empty. Then came the sound of tires. 3 cars pulling in behind the BMW. A sedan, an SUV, and a black Suburban that screamed prosecutors. Even through the rain, the foyer suddenly felt too vast for its heirs. Assistant U.S. Attorney Haynes was younger than I'd pictured. Alert, efficient. She flashed her credentials, introduced the King County detective beside her, and politely asked Dad and Aunt Claire to stay put while she served the papers. "Mr. Hart," she said to Grandpa, "per your counsel's request and our review of Blue Harbor's recordings, we're here to preserve evidence. No arrests today. We'll take statements, collect Sloan's notary files," her glance flicked to Dad, "and brief everyone here on their exposure." "Exposure?" Aunt Claire echoed, as if the word were foreign currency. "Elder financial exploitation. Attempted fraud. International abandonment with intent to defraud." Haynes's tone stayed calm, matter of fact. Dad slipped into his courtroom voice. "You have no proof." Grandpa's cane struck marble again. "Open the study," he told me. We went in. On the desk sat a hard drive labeled Harbor Cut. Haynes's tech plugged it in. The screen lit up, Starbucks chatter, the hiss of steaming milk. Dad's voice, flat, official, a medical update, routine language. Just sign here, Pop. Then Sloan counting bills, mumbling about off-site convenience. Aunt Claire's pad glowed under the blinds. Haynes didn't gloat. She only nodded. Time stamped. Logged. We'll need the Sable and Nordland emails too. Printed, Mia said from the doorway, rain-damp curls frizzing around her face. She crossed the room and placed another pile on the desk, labeled Exhibits A through F. Dad looked at me like I'd turned into something unrecognizable. You brought in the feds? Grandpa did, I said. I just followed through. He let out a bitter snort. Of course you did. You were always his little deputy. Something inside my chest wanted to crack, but I steadied my tone. I'm your daughter, and you let your father vanish. Don't mistake justice for betrayal. Haynes closed her laptop. We'll complete the evidentiary collection, then leave you to your civil proceedings, Mr. Hart. She turned to Grandpa. Your counsel asked that I deliver the second set personally. Grandpa accepted an envelope, weighing it in his palm like a fisherman deciding if a catch was worth keeping. Then he slid it across to Dad. Dad opened it. Read once, blinked, read again. This is an irrevocable charitable trust, Grandpa said quietly. The Bellevue Mansion, the Island Cabin, the Marina Stake, all transferred to the Hart Foundation for Maritime Scholarships. I retain a life estate. When I'm gone, Olivia becomes trustee. Aunt Claire swore under her breath, biting the rest back. Dad's voice rasped. You'd rather give everything to strangers than your own family? They won't abandon me overseas, Grandpa replied. And they'll remember their debt to the sea. Dad's hand crumpled the envelope's edge. I'll contest this. Grandpa's gaze was almost gentle. You can try. But contests require clean hands. Haynes thanked us, explained the next steps, and left with her team. The house absorbed the silence she left behind. Dad turned on me as if I'd set the snare myself. You think this makes you righteous? No, I said. It makes me accountable. His smile soured. Then be accountable for what follows. He left with Aunt Claire, trailing perfume and scorn. Grandpa exhaled, the sound like a dock worker letting a rope slip from his grasp. That's when I started crying. Litigation is its own kind of weather. Pressure climbs. Skies darken. People make bad choices when it rains too hard. Margaret Chen, yes, that Margaret everyone whispers about in downtown lobbies, took our civil case. We're not seeking damages, she said. We're seeking certainty. She filed for a temporary restraining order, barring Dad from entering the property, selling heirlooms, or contacting staff. Dad hired Robert Michaels, fond of Latin and dramatic pauses. He painted Grandpa as a moody patriarch, me as a manipulative granddaughter, and the trust as a selfish end run around filial duty. On social media, Aunt Claire posted a vague lament. When elders are exploited, families suffer. The comments spread like mildew. We turned the guest room into our war room, timelines taped to the walls, email chains color-tabbed, receipts in plastic sleeves. The Blue Harbor deed pulsed at the center like a living heart. Each night I filled a page in a cheap notebook. What we had, what we feared, what I wished I could say to my father without it sounding like a blade. Grandpa cooked. Slowly now, soups, 2 salty biscuits, stories I'd half remembered but finally heard right. I used to think money made men decent, he said, setting a bowl before me. It doesn't. It just makes them louder. Do you regret the trust? I asked. He thought a moment. No, I regret never teaching your father the difference between inheritance and legacy. There's a difference. Inheritance is what you receive, he said. Legacy is what you become. I tucked that line away like a bandage. I knew I'd need it. King County Superior Court, Department 12, mahogany benches, flags, the buzz of fluorescent lights. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. Aunt Claire wore a pale suit like frosted bone. Our side was a small Navy river. Grandpa, me, Maya, Margaret, our paralegal with her tidy bob and 1,000 open tabs. Michael stood sharp and theatrical. The opposing counsel will wave around Starbucks videos and notarize documents made under duress, he said, gesturing near Grandpa but never quite pointing. We ask the court to see past the melodrama. Margaret's reply was clean steel. A deed is a deed. No theatrics, no Latin, Michaels countered. A deed born of deceit isn't a deed, she said. The record shows misrepresentation, improper notarization, falsified valuations, and an international disappearance meant to seize possession. That's not melodrama. That's pattern. We called Sloan first. He reeked of nervous cologne. Under oath, his story buckled. Mr. Hart said his father had mobility problems. He mumbled. Margaret's brows lifted. Did he? Well, he walked in on his own. How much were you paid? 300. Standard? No, standard's 25. Margaret didn't smile. Thank you. Michaels tried to fog the air on cross, but the hiss of the espresso machine and the counted bills spoke louder. Then came my turn. My palms pressed against the wood. The oath tasted heavy. Margaret guided me through Lisbon, the concierge's tight smile, Patricia's orderly files. What did Blue Harbor feel like when you opened it? She asked. I didn't say like love laced with betrayal. I said, like clarity. Michaels tried to corner me. You dislike your father. I love him, I said, watching the flinch. That's what makes it hurt. And yet you called in the federal agents. I followed my grandfather's instructions. I reported a crime when I believed one occurred. Calm voice. Calm voice. Then Dad took the stand. Michaels softened his tone. Mr. Hart, why Lisbon? He loves the ocean, Dad said, voice deep and practiced. I wanted to give him memories, and the deed was his idea. He wanted to secure my future. Margaret moved forward, steady as a rising tide. Which came first, Mr. Hart? The valuation emails to 3 realtors or the supposed gift? He hesitated. I don't recall. Exhibit D shows your request to Sable Realty dated March 3rd. The deed you call a gift is dated March 26th, correct? He stared down. Yes. And you told a notary your father had mobility issues. That was a misunderstanding. She slid a transcript across the rail. In Lisbon, who had your father's passports? His lips pressed thin. I did. When you left the hotel, who carried them? On me. On you, Margaret repeated softly, like a mourner laying a lily. No further questions. I waited for anger to feel like triumph. It didn't. Judge Patricia Morrison leaned forward. I'll rule on the deed, she said. As for the trust, without proof of incapacity or coercion, her eyes flicked briefly toward me. This court recognizes a legitimate charitable document. Family obligations belong at dinner tables, not in equity court, Michael objected. The objection dissolved instantly. Her ruling on the deed was brief and brutal. Deed void due to fraud and undue influence. Possession remains with Theodore Hart. Defendant is barred from the property unless invited. The gavel struck, sharp, final, like a mooring line locking tight. Dad let out a shaky breath through a smile that wasn't real. He didn't look at me as he left the room. I'd thought the trust had been the twist, the graceful checkmate that saved the board. But Grandpa had kept one last piece hidden, face down. 2 nights after the verdict, he called me into the study and handed me a ship's log, its leather cover cracked with age. Turn to the last page, he said, in his neat, patient handwriting. If Richard ever tries to take what isn't his, give him what he thinks he wants. Give him the company. I blinked. Grandpa, what does that mean? He smiled, both sad and shining. He wanted the house and the glory. He never wanted the work. So, I gave him the work. The next morning, our family gathered at Hart Maritime headquarters. The board members, weathered men and women with faces burnished by sea wind, sat waiting. Dad arrived late, bristling. What kind of performance is this now? Grandpa slid a folder across the table. The CEO seat, he said evenly. If you want a legacy, build one. Sign here. Dad gave a short, mocking laugh, then stopped when he saw the documents. Interim CEO. The company he'd been handed was held together by dock lines, union agreements, insurance audits, Coast Guard checks, fuel hedges, aging hulls, and margins thinner than fishing line. The balance sheet looked more like a sailor's wallet after shore leave than a treasure chest. You've made it look terrible, Dad said. It's always been hard, Grandpa replied. I hid the strain so you could learn love before labor. But you learned contempt instead. Dad shoved the papers away. I won't be tested like a child. Then stop behaving like one, Grandpa said softly. Then, gentler still, here's the mercy, Richard. Take the job for 6 months, with a union mentor and a compliance monitor. Earn a salary. Pay your debts. Prove you can keep your crew safe in rough weather. Dad stared down at the floor. You call this love? It's what I call hope, he didn't reply. He just picked up the folder and walked out. Over the next 6 months, the company taught him humility, one meager paycheck at a time. He missed meetings, learned not to. Snapped at a captain, learned to listen. Tried cutting maintenance, watched the compliance officer silently shake her head until he relented. He paid down 2 credit cards, stopped gambling, didn't text me once. At Thanksgiving, he showed up at the mansion, standing on the porch like a boy asking to come inside after breaking a window. "I can't undo Lisbon," he said quietly, "but I can try to be a man your grandfather would hire." I held the door open but didn't step aside. "You burned the bridge," I said. "You can still cross it on your knees." He nodded once. He didn't kneel, not literally, but I saw the apology sink into his shoulders. The old arrogance fell away, replaced by something steadier. Work, not shortcuts. Sometimes mercy is the hardest justice. Grandpa and I planted winter pansies along the walkway, our breath misting in the cold air. The trust was finalized. The restraining order turned into a quiet boundary instead of a wall. Dad's name started showing up on company reports. Fewer red flags, more green check marks. Then, on a gray Tuesday, Oza Haynes called. She'd offered Dad a pre-charge diversion, restitution to the house staff whose hours he'd cut, a donation to the Maritime Scholarship Fund, and 6 months of verified service with the company. "We prefer redemption to trophies," she said. I liked her even more for that. That night, Grandpa poured tea and asked the question he'd asked me since childhood. "What did you become today, Olive?" I thought of Dad's bowed head, of Aunt Claire's fading posts, of how the docks smell in winter, iron, salt, and second chances. "Someone who finally knows the difference between inheritance and legacy," I said, "and someone who can forgive without forgetting." He smiled, set down his cup, and tipped a rook with his finger. "Checkmate's only beautiful," he murmured, "if your opponent stands up and shakes your hand." We heard a car outside. Footsteps. The bell rang. Dad stood there, a navy cap in his hand, his weariness honest for once. "I heard about the scholarships," he said. "I'm here to write a check." "Write it to work?" Grandpa told him. Dad nodded. "That's all I've been writing lately." This time, I stepped aside. We weren't healed, but we were moving forward. The house seemed to take a long, quiet breath, and for the first time in months, it exhaled.